Welcome to the Cosmic Connection. This is your place to explore the beauty and order of the cosmos.
And your connection to it all.
My name is Amanda Walsh, and I'm the founder of Astrology Hub.
And I'm Rick Levine, your cosmic navigator.
Now let's dive in.
Let's do it.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cosmic Connection. My name is Amanda Walsh. I'm the founder of Astrology Hub. Are you guys as excited about this as I am? Like, Rick, some months it's just like, I cannot wait for the month ahead forecast from you. And this is definitely one of those months. So I am so happy to be here with you. And I see Stephanie and Edith are in the chat already. They're excited too.
Yeah, this is one of those months. And yeah. Looking at months ahead, sometimes it's like I have it all together and I know exactly. This one is a bit interesting because there's so much happening. It's really like a busy month, and it has all kinds of potential and a few pitfall traps. So it'll be hard to nail exactly what it is until we go through it. I mean, obviously, we've been in times for the last months, for the last couple of years, where it doesn't matter how good an astrologer you are, you're not going to predict what's happening tomorrow. And of course, I'm not that much into predictions as much as I am into trying to understand the nature of the energy. But April is a busy month.
It feels very different already. Like the energy of the last 2 years, even though we've had some waves, it's felt kind of the same. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. No, that's exactly it. And I also think that this energy is really easy to misread. Now, I know we're looking at an April forecast, and depending upon where you are in the world, the first event of April or the last event of March is the Aries new moon. So I know we talked a little bit about that last month, but it's like I'm amazed at how many astrologers are reading this new moon what I would consider to be wrong. Now, one never knows. I mean, and I'm not really here to say that other people are wrong, but everyone's talking about this new moon as like, do it. This is exciting. We have a new moon in Aries. This is the real astrological new year. You know, Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, and we have Mercury and the new moon, the sun and the moon together, and Chiron is there. And so we can heal, we can talk about it, we can move forward. This is the general buzz. And I look at the chart and all I see is the ruling planet of Aries, Mars, 3 degrees away from coming into a conjunction with Saturn, saying, "You think you're going somewhere? Let me run that one by the cosmic taskmaster and see what he or she has to say." And now, granted, that happens pretty quickly. The exact Mars-Saturn conjunction is on April 4th, I think. Somewhere here. There we go. Yeah, it's on April 4th. But even still, it kind of sets up the month as like where it's the racehorse in the starting gate and just champing at the bit and ready to go, and it's the new moon and we go, and we can't quite go yet. And so it's just this odd thing. And I don't see other people writing about this that much. I mean, we had Venus lined up with Saturn too a few days ago. And right now, Saturn is holding its own, almost like Saturn is saying, well, for a year or so, I ran the whole show, even though Pluto maybe was taking the credit. Saturn and Pluto were both in Capricorn, and Jupiter was there, and the South Node was there, and there was all this. And now the energy's moved off into Aquarius and into Pisces and even into Aries. But Saturn is like right in the middle between Venus and Mars. And Saturn's in some way saying, I'm not letting go yet. I'm not letting go yet. So I don't know. We'll see. It's an interesting one, but I really think that Saturn is holding more weight here than appears to other people. At least what I've read. I'm sure that, and again, astrology is multivalent. There's all different ways to make connections between things, and although I have a solar return coming up in a week, and I am an incurable Aries with, as I like to say, over the legal limit of planets in Aries, I'm not quite convinced that that the starting gate is open and we're ready to run yet.
Wow.
But we'll get.
Interesting, Rick. So Claudia says 1 foot on the pedal, the other on the brake.
Well, that's my one-liner and has been for 20 years for Saturn and Mars, because Mars is the accelerator. That's Mars's job. Mars's job is to go as fast as it can toward whatever it needs to do to get it done, to break through the wall. If it means going faster to hit that wall so it crashes right through it, that's Mars. Mars is red hot, do it now, go for it. Saturn, on the other hand, is working the brake, going, whoa, if you go that fast, you'll go around this curve and go off the road. And so often when you see in a birth chart, when you see Saturn and Mars by trine, you often know that this is someone who actually knows how to work the gas and the brake to get the maximum speeds, but will never lose the road. Whereas if you see Mars and Saturn by square, you often can assume that this person, until they mature enough, maybe through a few accidents early in life, that they have to learn how to work that gas and brake, because they're the person that would much rather step on the gas and give it all they got and then go, oh crap, and then hit on the brake to stop it as fast as they can. And so you can see that gas brake metaphor really working. And right now at the new moon, we're recording this, on the afternoon of March 31st. And so we have the new moon coming up either late tonight if you're in Hawaii or in Seattle, but it is on April 1st if you're anywhere else in the United States and or in Europe or in Australia.
So, Rick, we have Rachel Ono Jaffe, who is our inner circle astrologer this month. She did her new moon forecast yesterday.
Cool.
She showed a picture of a woman standing next to a Lamborghini and was saying that essentially we're like on a highway with no speed limit in a fast car. And what I've been feeling is that that's exhilarating, right? That feels so good. The wind's in your hair, the sun's shining down. And yet if you crash, you're going to crash hard. And so it's like having even an internal foot on the pedal to the metal and also on the brakes at the same time, because it's like, yes, we're going and there's all this energy and it's kind of high octane. It's like, it's really charged, and like temper yourself a little bit so you don't just totally fly out of control. And
you know what it is, Amanda, as you're talking, it's yes, we can, but should we?
Yeah, exactly. I can feel that very, very strong. So Rick, last month you talked about the theme being turning point. So that's where we came from last month. This month, what would you say our theme is?
Let's come back. Let's cycle back to that. I'm still forming the theme. I mean, there's you see, the thing is that once we get past that first week, everything's cleared. All the planets are cleared of both Pluto and Saturn. Remember, starting back before Christmas, we had Venus conjuncting Saturn. And then we had Mercury conjuncting, we had Venus conjuncting Pluto, and then we had Mercury conjuncting Pluto, and then the retrogrades of both of them in the directs. And as we had that last conjunction of Venus and Mars on Pluto last month, that was like all the planets are cleared Pluto. We don't have Pluto, and I mean, Pluto's still there. But we don't have planets like lined up with Pluto again until next year, when the faster moving planets come all the way around. But now we have Venus having just conjoined Saturn just a couple days ago, and Mars coming up to Saturn on April 4th. And once Mars is on the other side of Saturn, it's like now the road is straight and we don't have the same curves that we had. There is one other thing, though, that we're going to run into all month, but we're going to be free from both Saturn and Pluto, at least by direct conjunction, and that's significant. In fact, when it comes to Saturn, we actually get some support because, we have all the planets right now squeezed into a very small area of the sky. We've talked about this, and other astrologers have. There's even a Vedic term, a Vedic yoga, that is when all of the planets are on one side of the nodal axis. The nodal axis is defines the half circle, if you will. And the nodes right now are in Taurus and Scorpio. And we have all the planets in the sky, starting with Pluto in late Capricorn, in Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, and Taurus. And they're all on one side of the nodes. And Vedic astrology, which often holds nothing back when it comes to value judgments, says that this, what's the technical word? Sucks. It's not good. And it's not good because the tendency is to put all of our eggs in one basket. And if that doesn't work, we have no plan B. Now, I'm not saying that's happening out there socially on the planet. It is. And I'm not saying it's happening in any one of our individual lives, but it probably is. And of course, I shouldn't say of course, the Vedic solution to this is to have a few backup game plans. So that's one of the things that we should be thinking of. It's one of the things we should have been thinking of a month or two ago, but it's one of the things that we should be thinking of still now, especially as we're going to come into eclipse season. The full moon on April 30th, I think it is, is basically the first of two eclipses. And so we're coming into eclipse season, the first eclipse season of 2022. So it's not like there's no more stress. It's just that it's not Saturn sitting on Mars. Right now, again, it's like we have, even if you look at some of the geopolitical situations, we have, but for every one of them, there's a reason why we can't do it. We're not doing it. We're not doing it yet. Where we can't get the vote. We can't threaten someone who's already threatened. I mean, whatever it is, there's reasons stacked up, and that's how Saturn is holding that Mars back. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens by the 5th of April, when Mars, faster moving than Saturn, is on the other side of Saturn. We still have all those planets in Aries. Actually, the moon has moved on into Taurus and Gemini, but we get that forward motion. Remember, a new moon chart is not a chart for the moment. It's a chart for how the moment defines the next few weeks of forward or outward motion. But what I was going to say, two other things I want to say before we kind of zone in on the dates, and then obviously talk about the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is on psychedelics. We need to just point that out, and that would be the Jupiter-Neptune Conjunction. So there is an elephant in the room, but he's painted with paisleys.
Oh, I love that so much. Okay.
All right. So once Mars is on the other side of Saturn, we have Jupiter on the 5th making a semi-sextile, a half of a sextile with Saturn. Often when there's a lot of transits going on, I kind of just glibly pass over semi-sextiles. A lot of astrologers do, some don't, but they are an aspect, and they're a 12th harmonic aspect, because a semi-sextile is 1/12 of a circle. It's when two planets are at the same degree but one sign apart. And going back to the Hellenistic tradition, Ptolemy called the aspects that were one sign apart or the aspect that was one sign apart from the opposition. So in other words, he said those aspects were not really aspects because the planets couldn't see each other. He called them inconjuncts. We moderners sometimes use the word inconjunct to describe the quincunx, which is the one planet off of the opposition. But that's not correct, because the inconjunct in the Ptolemaic scheme was both a quincunx and a semi-sextile. And the reason why I'm saying this is that a lot of people look at a chart and they go, a sextile is half of a trine's good, a sextile is good, maybe not as strong, it's opportunity rather than just free flowing. And then the semi-sextiles, half of the sextile, so that's probably good too. It's not, it sucks also. Why? Because it's more like the quincunx. The two planets can't see each other. They're like operating on different pages of the book or even different books. And the reason why I'm emphasizing this is that when we have so many planets, well, all the planets clustered within a trine, in other words, Pluto is the first of the planets at 28 degrees, now 28 and a half degrees of Capricorn. And you go a trine all the way around to 28 and a half degrees of Taurus, everything is contained within that. So it's what we would call a bundle. It's like everything is very, very focused. What that means is that there are no oppositions. There can't be, because everything's on one side of the circle. And an opposition, incidentally, as the aspect of relationship, is the way in which we see others seeing ourselves. It's the mirror. It's the ability to see our projections, whether we know they're projections or not, in someone else. And when I look at a natal chart, this is not a natal chart we're looking at. Well, it is for someone that was just born just now. Oh, and that person born just now. Oh, and just no. But we're looking at this as a chart of the world. But when I look at a chart that has no oppositions in it as a natal chart, it's like the person can't get a self-image. I call it a vampire chart, not because they stay up all night sucking blood out of people's necks, or because garlic and a cross and sunshine makes them melt, because they can't see themselves in the mirror. There's no opposition. And in a way, that's where we are right now. We're so dead set individually and culturally on where we're going and what we're doing. It's hard to get perspective, maybe even impossible. That changes once a month for 2 weeks when the moon goes around to the other side, because the moon goes all the way around once a month. And for 2 weeks, the moon is on the opposite side of the chart, becoming what Mark Edmund Jones called the handle of the bucket. The moon has the job of reflecting everything, not just the one planet it happens to be opposed to. And so when we have a lot of planets clustered together, there can't be any oppositions. There's no trines because there are no planets. Everything is contained within a trine. There's rare to have a square because they have to be right at the outer edges. And what that means is that the predominant aspects are going to be sextiles and semi-sextiles. So we have a month. I ran something that I don't normally run, but I just sorted by the aspects for the month. And we have a bunch of conjunctions because the planets, as they're close together, they're tripping back and forth over each other as the faster ones are moving over the slow ones. But the only opposition we have all month is the full moon on April 16th, because that's what a full moon is an opposition. The only trine we have is on not the last day of the month, but April 28th. Mercury escapes from that containment, and Mercury trines Pluto as it becomes the only planet that's pushing outside of the width of that trine. Point is, we only have one trine all month, and that is Mercury trining Pluto on the 28th. We have a couple of squares because Pluto being the earliest planet, there are a few faster moving planets that'll move through that square to Pluto and even to Saturn. So we have Mercury squaring Pluto. This is on April 10th. We have the Sun squaring Pluto on April 18th. These are both tough days. They're having to deal with information that we may not want to deal with. They're dealing with feelings that come up, dealing with power struggles. And then Mercury makes a square to Saturn on April 24th. There's 3 squares all month. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. There are 15 semi-sextiles. That's where I was going with this. Now, without interpreting any one of the semi-sextiles and any one of the dates, although I could tell you that on April 2nd, the Sun and Mercury semi-sextile Uranus, on the 3rd, Venus semi-sextiles Pluto, on the 4th, Mars semi-sextiles Jupiter. I mean, they're stacking up one after another. Jupiter semi-sextiles Saturn on April 5th, Mars semi-sextiles Neptune on April 6th, Mercury semi-sextiles Jupiter on April 7th, and it also semi-sextiles Neptune because Jupiter and Neptune are close together. And this continues all month. What does this mean? I think it means that the month is going to be as annoying as hell. Maybe hell isn't the right word. But you see, like quincunxes, semi-sextiles are irritating because we can't quite get it in focus. We can't quite see it for what it is. We can't quite act. I mean, a square, people complain about squares. Well, a square motivates us, and the most magnificent work from an artist, from anyone doing any sort of production at a square, man, that's when you apply your inner conflicts and you make something happen. There's something you can, like, it's juicy. You can do something with it. Quincunxes and semi-sextiles, not so much. And so maybe this is the theme that sits behind the month, is that, I mean, it is like in some way we're at a point of on the launch pad, but we're not ready to launch yet. Then we get to launch, but there's like one thing after another. And it's not that the launch won't be successful. It's that we have to deal with a whole lot more stuff along the way than we might have thought. And so maybe there is an irritation here. There's an inability to see the effect from the cause. You know, we normally think cause and effect. It's hard to get perspective. Maybe that's the term for the month. Lack of perspective.
Oh, okay.
Lost perspective. We'll get there. We're just throwing words out right now, but you know, having said all that, there's some really exciting things happening this month also, and that's what makes it so difficult to just put in a nicely wrapped up box, put a ribbon on it, and go, here, you know, this is a wonderful present, or here, this is something you don't want, but I'm giving it to you anyhow. Hi, here, this is a mixed blessing. Figure it out.
I like that. But, you know, one of the things you said in the beginning that I think still seems to be relevant as maybe the thing for us to take away from all this is just to have a plan B. Like move things forward. Don't get frustrated if they don't move as fast as you want them to. And be aware of the fact that you might not totally have perspective right now. Like you might not be able
true.
to
I would suggest not to stop at B. That we would want a plan C, D, E, F. It's like anything we can do to stretch our perspective.
Yes.
You know, and maybe that's to frame this in a more positive way rather than just saying this is an irritation, this sucks, this whatever, is to say that the theme for the month is to widen your perspective. Not to hit the gas pedal, but to widen your perspective.
Right.
The gas pedal may be part of that, but understanding that there's still Saturn there or whatever, you know, whatever the other issues are. And again, we haven't gotten to the psychedelic elephant yet, but we will.
Can't wait to get to that elephant. Okay, so widen your perspective. And also I was thinking, how do you do that? Like, how do you actually widen your perspective?
Yeah, hang out with the psychedelic elephant.
Perfect. Okay, well, maybe we just need to go to him.
There are before we go there though, there are a couple of sign changes that we should mention, and the lunations, because obviously the one that is tonight or tomorrow morning, depending upon where you are, meaning either late on the evening or night of March 31st or on April 1st, there's the Aries new moon, and even that is so tied up in what I'm talking about, because all these Aries planets, there's Mercury, the Sun Moon conjunction, and Chiron, all within a couple of degrees. And then we have Mars, Saturn, and Venus all within a few degrees, but with Saturn right at the midpoint. And the angle between Saturn and between Venus in particular, and Mercury in particular, is a half of a square. And we also have some of those this month also, which I left out earlier. They're not as many as the semi-sextiles, but although we don't have squares, half squares are sometimes more difficult than squares because they still have that pressure to create, but we don't have the perspective. But so we open the month with the lunation, with the new moon in Aries. Then, and on the middle of the month, on April 16th, we have the full moon, and that full moon is in Libra. We'll talk about that in a little bit more in a little bit. But then we have the new moon again on April 30th, and that new moon is an eclipse. Mm-hmm. And eclipses often denote periods of change, and they denote where those changes will be. These eclipses coming up because the nodes have retrograded back into Taurus and Scorpio. It would not be surprising for these coming eclipses to focus on power struggles. Obviously, we're seeing that playing out on a global scenario right now, and also money, because Taurus and Scorpio are both my money and our money. And we're seeing that play right into this whole thing of power struggle that's going on. So I think that the eclipses will maybe up the ante on whatever that is that's happening on those levels. All right, sign changes. Just a couple of those before we get into the into the tripped out elephant. I don't know how we got on that one.
So, did you just think of that? Is that the first time you said that? The psychedelic tripped out elephant?
Yeah, oh, wow. Yeah, it is. It is.
Lucky us.
Life is an Aries. The first time I say everything is like while I'm saying it. Or, all right, so just all the planets are moving pretty quickly now. Pluto, I think, is the first planet to turn retrograde, and Pluto turns retrograde on April 29th. So Pluto is the first, and then will be Saturn, Jupiter, Neptune. They'll fall in order of the outer planets. We also have Mercury that'll turn retrograde in May. But right now, all the planets are direct, and they're all moving along at a pretty good clip, which is why there are so many aspects this month. Even though they're annoying and irritating semi-squares and semi-sextiles and conjunctions, there's a lot of planetary movement. Mercury is traveling along at almost 2 degrees a day right now. Mercury itself, Mercury makes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 20. Mercury makes 25 aspects this month.
Wow.
And on a month when Mercury has just turned direct or retrograde, it might make 3 or 5 or 8 aspects in a month. Now, again, this is a little different than some other astrologers tend to do. I'm not interpreting each and every one of the individual aspects. We could, but we only have an hour. And your inner circle guides and people will be doing that on a regular basis. I'm fascinated with the stuff of just how much noise there is this month. Noisy. There's another good word for the month. You ever hear that? What kind of noise annoys an oyster?
No, I've never heard that.
Noisy noise annoys an oyster.
Just play that back. I don't even know what you just said.
What kind of noise annoys an oyster? A noisy noise annoys an oyster. Never mind.
It's
Wait.
so good. No, I got it the second time around. I don't know about you all, but I got it that time.
Okay. So because there are so many planets moving so quickly, we have Mercury, Venus, and Mars, and the Sun all changing signs this month. In fact, Mercury is moving fast enough that Mercury, which is right now in Aries, it will be in Aries through the through tonight's new moon, and Mercury will move into Taurus on April 10th. That's the first of the planets, other than Uranus, which has been in Taurus for like 4 years already. It's halfway through its 7-year run through Taurus. But Mercury moves into Taurus on April 10th. And incidentally, that means that Mercury moving very quickly will actually conjoin Uranus on April 17th. So Mercury is ahead of the pack, and it becomes the first of the planets, other than the moon, which does this once a month. The moon lines up with Uranus once a month. The moon lines up with every planet once a month. But the inner planets, typically without counting retrogrades, line up with the outer planets once a year. So Mercury is the first of the inner planets that lines up with Uranus. It does that on April 17th. Then on April 19th, the Sun moves from Aries into Taurus. It won't line up with Uranus until May. But then we also have Venus having been in Aquarius, where it lined up with both Mars and Saturn over the last weeks in Aquarius. Venus moves into Pisces on April 5th. Venus likes being in Pisces. It's interesting. Venus is exalted in Pisces, and there's a sense of I always think of Venus in Pisces as Angora. Not that I'm suggesting that we should slaughter any animals to get their soft, lovely fur, but there's something about Venus that in Pisces that is very soft and loving and compassionate. And Venus moves into Pisces on April 5th. And then Mars moves into Pisces on April 14th. That's not quite as pretty a picture, because Mars goes into Pisces and all of a sudden goes, where was I going? Wait, who am I? How did I get here? Well, why am I being pulled this way by the current? Mars in Pisces has a hard time getting its bearings. I always think of Mars as Pisces as the person who's all has the party invitation, is all dressed up, ready to go to the party. The party starts at 8:00, and somehow the dog chewed off the address part, and they don't know where the party is. It's like all ready to go, but I don't know where I'm going. And so Mars moves into Pisces. There's a higher side of Mars in Pisces. Also, like there is in any planet and sign, Mars in Pisces is also the spiritual warrior. This is the person who's ready to fight for some higher spiritual belief. Unfortunately, it's also the person who's willing to fight for some aberrated delusion.
Is this going to add to our psychedelic elephant trip
Absolutely.
in the middle of the month?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have Venus moving into Pisces on April 5th, and we have Mars moving into Pisces right at the tail end of the psychedelic elephant. That's going to become a thing now. The psychedelic elephant experience, and because Mars doesn't move into Pisces until April 14th, by then the conjunction between Jupiter and Neptune is already waning, but they're still there. They're still in the same sign. They're still cohabitating Pisces as they are now. But because Mercury is moving so fast, Mercury moves into Taurus on April 10th, but it moves into Gemini on April 29th. Poof, 2 degrees a day. And Mercury loves being in Gemini. It's its first primary home sign, Gemini and Virgo. Mercury's domiciles. And so we're definitely getting a lot of change of the energy in the air. And so those are all kind of significant and important things. But now let's come back to the stoned out elephant sitting. Is the elephant sitting in the middle of the table or just in the room? I've heard different versions of this. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's talk about the elephant that's on the table.
That's true. Well, I guess we get to decide.
It depends on how strong the table is.
Right. Well, it might be kind of funny if he breaks the table too. That'll add to our whole trip.
That's right. Maybe this elephant is Dumbo. Do you remember the flying elephant?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why do I think that was probably in some way ultimately cruel to the elephant? But whatever. So we have Jupiter, which is kind of in a strange pattern, because normally we think of Jupiter as being 1 year in a sign, which it is on the average. But sometimes, because of its retrograde, it does weird things where it catches energy just slightly differently. And we had Jupiter in Aquarius, and then it bumped into Pisces, and then it went back into Aquarius, and now it's running through Pisces so quickly that it's on into Aries by I think by May. Jupiter enters Aries. Sorry for that. I don't have the date in front of me. There it is. I suppose I could reach up and grab my ephemeris. On May 11th, Jupiter moves into Aries. So Jupiter is just flying through this part of Pisces, remembering, though, that Jupiter was in Pisces for a while, almost a year ago. So it's kind of this odd energy. But what that means is that Jupiter actually will join, will align, will catch up, because Jupiter, even though we think of it as a slower moving planet, it takes 12 years to go around the zodiac once. Neptune takes 165 years to go around once. So Jupiter is catching up to Neptune in Pisces for the first time in about 165 years, a little bit more than that, actually, because by the time Jupiter goes around once, Pisces will be in the next sign. Neptune will be in the next sign. Neptune spends about 12, 13, 14 years in a sign. And so the last time we had Jupiter and Pisces together, I keep saying Pisces, sorry about that. The last time we had Jupiter and Neptune together in Pisces was back in the mid 1800s, where we saw the rise of spiritualism. There was a lot of other things going on then, but there were also the abolition movement pre-Civil War was cooking up. There's this whole sense of idealism. Remember, Jupiter and Neptune. I have a theory, and some of you have heard this before. I actually believe that Jupiter and Neptune are the same planet. They're like mirror images of one and another. It's like Neptune is Jupiter, who's escaped from prison here being Saturn. Jupiter's expansive. Jupiter's like a magnifying lens. Wherever Jupiter is, Jupiter makes things look bigger and better and more, and sometimes more is not necessarily better, but Jupiter is indiscriminately expansive. But Jupiter can only expand to the limit. You blow up a balloon, and you blow it up too much, and it pops, because Jupiter can't go beyond Saturn. Jupiter has to be, even though Jupiter is beliefs, Jupiter is more opinions. It has to be logical. Jupiter is philosophy. Jupiter is political science, because Jupiter has to be rational. Why? Because Saturn contains logic and rationality. Neptune, on the other hand, is Jupiter that's no longer contained by Saturn. And so Neptune and Jupiter are the same energy. They're both expansive. But we don't think of Neptune as being expansive because it's already expanded. We think of it as being diffusive because it can diffuse, and that's not diffusive like a fuse on a bomb. It's something that's diffused, DIF, not DEF, two different words. But Neptune is expansive, but it doesn't have to answer to reality. It doesn't have to answer to dad. It doesn't have to answer to Saturn. It doesn't have to answer to anything that's real. And therefore, Neptune can go forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. So Jupiter and Neptune, though, have a lot in common. And of course, we can't forget the fact that until the discovery of Neptune in the mid 19th century, the fact is that Jupiter, like Mercury, rules both Gemini and Virgo traditionally, and Venus rules both Taurus and Libra. Jupiter ruled both Sagittarius and Pisces. And along came Neptune, and it was close enough, and it seemed like it fit with Pisces, that we moderners say that Neptune is at home in Pisces. Well, Neptune is associated with Pisces, but according to the old traditional thema mundi, the kind of the logic of how the worldview of astrology was put together, Jupiter is at home in Pisces. But with Neptune there, Neptune is supporting it even more. And I think this is like, Saturn and Pluto line up once every 32, 38 years, 3 times a century. But it's only once in every 400 or 500 years or so that they line up while Saturn is in its home sign of Capricorn. And this recent January 2020, when we had Saturn line up with Pluto, this was more potent than many of the other recent ones, arguably. And it was because Saturn was in its home sign. The last time that happened was the beginning of the Protestant Reformation, when Martin Luther protested the idea of indulgences in the Catholic Church and other things. The reason why this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction is so important is that it's not a once every 13 year cycle, because Jupiter goes around once and Neptune's moved forward a little bit. So Jupiter goes around in 12 years, and it takes about another year for it to catch up to Neptune. The fact that it's doing this in their home signs amplifies the energy. So it's not only expansive, philosophical, big thinking, grandiose thinking Jupiter, combined with the imagination and the dreams and the visions of Neptune. But on top of that, in Pisces, they're like amplified because they're in a sign that's not going to stop them. Now, the exact conjunction, they've been tracking pretty closely already. Jupiter moved into Pisces back in I think January. It was in January of this year, and now Jupiter and Neptune are in the same sign. They're cohabitating, and here at the end of March, Jupiter is already within a couple of degrees of being exact. On April 1st, Jupiter is at roughly 21 and a half degrees of Pisces. Actually, 21 degrees, 29 minutes, 30 minutes is a half. Neptune is at 23 and a half degrees of Pisces, actually 23 degrees and 36 minutes. But for all practical purposes, Jupiter is 2 degrees away from Neptune. Neptune's moving pretty slowly, and Jupiter is moving pretty much as fast as it goes. So what that means is that by April 12th, Jupiter and Neptune will conjoin. They will be at the exact same place in the sky on the 12th of April at 23 degrees of Pisces. Look at your own charts. Look at the charts of people you know. Anyone who has planets at 23 degrees of Pisces, give or take a few degrees, or the opposite sign, 23 degrees of Virgo, give or take a few degrees, or the square signs, 23 degrees of either Sagittarius or Gemini. Those people will be getting the brunt of of how this expansive belief, visionary, dreamy energy, spiritual, compassionate kind of comes into their lives. But those with planets at 23 degrees, give or take a few, Scorpio and or Cancer, they'll be getting a trine from this. So wherever you have planets at 23 degrees of any sign, the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction will be in some way aspecting it. But one of the things to do is to look at your chart and see where does 23 degrees of Pisces fall, and make an X there, because that's where the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction is impacting your life. And the question of how it impacts it, it depends. Neptune, when it was first discovered, was considered to be a pretty bad planet. Why? Because it was delusion, it was illusion, it was fantasy, it was not real. Well, I remember Rob Hand writing in, I think it was Horoscope Symbols a gazillion years ago. He wrote, "We used to think that Saturn was reality and Neptune is illusion, whereas now we've discovered that Neptune is reality and Saturn is the illusion there ever was one." The point here is that Neptune can be a dream, and dreams can become real. With Jupiter there, it's bringing it inside of Saturn. It's giving us the ability to think that it really can become manifest within the realms of Saturn, because Jupiter is inside Saturn. And so the problem with manifesting a dream, though, is this. Most of the time, manifested dreams are not quite as good as they were when they were dreams. When we have a dream of, I'm going to win the lottery and this is what's going to happen, I'm going to meet the man or the woman of my life and live happily ever after, I'm going to get a dream job and I want to do it in the realm of graphic arts or whatever. Then we get the job and it's like, wow, this is amazing. And then we have to deal with the crap that goes along with it. Because in the three-dimensional world, things aren't perfect. Whereas in the realm of Neptune, if we're creating an illusion, we create it the way we want it to. So the way I like to say it, because here's where Saturn comes into the picture. Saturn's job is like seeding a cloud. Saturn's job is to precipitate the dreams of illusion into the three-dimensional world. That's what Saturn's job is. And I think of Caroline Casey, who says that Neptune, imagination, she says, lays the tracks for the reality train to follow. William Blake. Sorry, I got personal. Bill Blake. William Blake, the great English mystic poet, wrote from Proverbs of Hell in his work, Heaven and Hell, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. He wrote, "What is now proved," Saturn. He didn't write Saturn. I just added that parenthetically. "What is now proved was once only imagined." I like to think of Neptune's job is to create an imaginary scaffolding upon which we can then build reality. If we don't have the dream, we're not going to manifest anything. We need first the fantasy, the dream, the illusion, the potential, the idea. These are all having to do with the psychedelic elephant, who can imagine anything because Neptune is there and it's not constrained by reality. Now the question becomes, are we going to just drift off into some, drug-induced or religious-induced fantasy, or politically, Jupiter is politics, politically induced fantasy? Are we going to drift off into some fantasy only to find us, when we precipitate into reality, absolutely discouraged and disillusioned. And here we have to say, we have to go here, that disillusionment is really important. It's an important part of maturity. Why? Because Neptune is illusion. And as long as something remains in the dream state, we're infantile, we're kids, we're believing in whatever the dream is. That's okay. But in order for that dream to become real, the dream has to be disillusioned, meaning we have to get rid of the illusions and make it real. And so when someone says, "Oh, I'm really disillusioned," I go, "Wow, good." It's not what people expect. The other Neptune word that, as long as we're on Jupiter-Neptune, the other Neptune word that I think is really important is confusion. It's been said that a painful experience or a confusing experience is what starts most people on their spiritual journey. Confusion is an interesting word. What does it mean? Well, Greek con is like a conjunction. It means as one. That means together. Fusion means two things melting together. The word confusion means two things melting together. Here's the problem. The ego don't like that shit. Because the ego needs to know that my boundary is separate from your boundary, and that when I get close to you, I am me and you are you. But Neptune comes in, and here comes the John Lennon line. I've been corrected on this. I attributed to Paul McCartney, great sin, mea culpa. And the line is, I am you as you are me, as we are all together, goo goo gajoob. That's Neptune basically fuzzing the line and saying, all we are is love. The illusion of Amanda, the illusion of Rick, those are Saturnian real world, but they're illusions. The reality is that we are all fish, Pisces, we are all fish, and the sea of consciousness, the ocean of consciousness is flowing through all of us. We are not separate. We are one. We are all part of the same cosmic ocean or cesspool, depending upon what part of the ocean we're in. But it's from that ocean that things then crystallize. And as the sun moves into Aries, they begin their new round of growth. So this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction is incredibly important. But we have to be aware. We have to stay aware that there is a difference between an illusion that stays an illusion that we think is reality, even though it's an illusion, or an illusion that we think is reality so strongly that we actually can turn it into reality. And there are differences. When Martin Luther King said, I have a dream, that was Neptune and Jupiter. That was a fantasy, But as people in the real world work to make that dream real, that's Saturn intervening and taking the Neptune and turning it more into Jupiter. So this is the potential of April. Does it mean that we'll be able to realize that potential? Unfortunately, no. But the potential is there, and I think it just remains incumbent upon us to remember the difference. There is a difference between reality and illusion. Now, it's going to be fuzzy because during April, remember, we already talked about how both Venus and Mars ingress into Pisces, and Venus actually on the day of the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction on the 12th, Venus is at about 6-7 degrees of Pisces. Mars is still hanging back in Aquarius. But Venus moves forward, and Venus joins up with Neptune on April 26th, 27th. At the same time, the moon is moving through Pisces. The moon enters Pisces on the April 25th. So on April 25th, 26th, and 27th, even though most of us will think that the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction is already 2 weeks in the past, Why? Because on April 25th, we're going to have 5 planets in Pisces. We're going to have the Moon, Mars, Venus, Neptune, and Jupiter. And so even though the exact conjunction is passed, with the Moon, Mars, and Venus not only all in Pisces, but Venus now inching up to conjoin Neptune, which it does on the 26th, 27th, right in there. The moon sweeps across that, and by the 27th, the moon moves on into Aries. But at the same time, Mars lingering behind is also going to catch up with that conjunction. So we have Venus and Neptune exact on the 26th, 27th. Then we have Venus exactly conjunct Jupiter on the 30th onto May 1st. And it's not until May that Mars actually catches up with Neptune around May 18th. But by that time, Jupiter's already, I'm out of here, guys. I'm off into Aries. So we have this magical thing about this. We got to give this psychedelic elephant a name. Dumbo doesn't work.
No. Anybody have any ideas?
Yeah, we need ideas.
Name of the psychedelic elephant.
Yeah.
We're going to get some good ideas, I can tell.
Anyhow, we can't underestimate the importance of this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, and also its lingering impact all the way through the middle of May when Mars lines up with Neptune. You know, Mars lining up with Neptune is, in a natal chart, the best description I've ever seen of it comes from Grant Louis. Some of you know Grant Louis was one of my favorite astrologers. He wrote some of the most popular astrology books ever, including Astrology for the Millions and heaven knows what. And he retired as a tenured English professor from, I think, Colgate College in New York to become the editor of Horoscope magazine. And Grant Louis never had an insurance policy. He had a life insurance policy for the last month of his life, and he died of natural causes, but he never had a life insurance policy until a month before he died. And because he was an English professor, his writing is magnificent. And he also wrote in the late 30s, 40s, into the early 50s. And so he kind of was pre-psychological. A lot of his stuff feels different than the post-Dane Rudyard kind of more psychological, spiritual, evolutionary type astrology that many of us moderners subscribe to. And he calls the Mars, and I know this isn't until May, and we'll probably repeat myself in May, but he calls the Mars-Neptune Conjunction the sign of the shapeshifter. The person who comes to mind who has an exact Mars-Neptune conjunction was Bill Clinton, Bill Clinton. But Bill Clinton had the planet Venus right there in the mix. And so it switched it a little bit. But the idea of the shapeshifter is someone who, when they feel good, seems like they're 10 feet tall, indestructible, and magnificent. And we all know people who are like that. But that same person 3 days later, when something's wrong, like they're being impeached or something, just looks like some gnome that should be in a corner somewhere not talking to anyone. In other words, the Mars physicality takes on the illusion. In the olden times, the witches, the word glamour doesn't mean what it means in modern times. It meant that a small, or let me say physically diminutive woman who was, let's say, 4.5 feet tall, by conjuring up the right energy, could come into a room and seem like a 6 foot tall goddess. That's Mars-Neptune. And of course, the Venus-Neptune that is occurring this month, the Venus-Neptune, which occurs on on April 27th, is that same thing, but it's in reference to fantasy and to love and to dreams. And so I think that this, even though I want to bring this to conclusion. Even though the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction occurs on April 12th, it's already occurring, and it'll be with us until past mid-May, until Mars moves out of Pisces, and Mars, when it moves into Aries around May 25th, that's when the game changes. And even though the sun is way ahead now in Gemini by May 25th, we now have 5 planets even in Aries, because we'll have Mars and Jupiter and Chiron still, and the moon and Venus all in Aries. And so we're getting, again, the reason why I'm doing this is, again, we're getting the sense that this new moon on April 1st is the launch pad, but the greatest density of Aries energy isn't until the end of May. Can you feel that Saturnian energy? It's not Saturn specifically, but can you feel how that normally Aries is magnificent in the moment. It comes and goes. Hey, I'm in Aries. I know that, it's like boom, you show up and now you're gone. It's like, dandelions are perfect Aries energy, because a dandelion can go from flat surface on the grass to a full flower in one day. And I'm told by beekeeper friends, when the dandelions are up, bees forget everything else. It's like, that's the best drug. It's just like, and then they're gone. They only last a day and then they're gone. They go to seed flower that quickly. But the point here is that although April, where we've moved, it's already spring, we've moved into the season of the year of the first sign of spring, Aries, of the first sign of the zodiac. Here we are at the end of May with more planets in Aries than in any other sign. And when you have 5 planets in a sign, that's making a statement. So I think we should probably come back to the full moon and the new moon real quickly, just so that we can touch on them and say that we covered them. But I think maybe the key words for April is delayed response, or something, delayed gratification, where it feels like we're gonna get it now, but it's gonna take a while.
That's what I keep thinking of when you're talking about all these different aspects that are happening, and is that it's like even the Jupiter Neptune in Pisces, it's like we have this opening. It's almost like the clouds part and the sun comes down and we have these visions and dreams and we can bring these ideals into reality. But what you keep bringing up is that once the dreams come into reality, then they're real and they're no longer the fantasy that just feels so good. It's like, dreaming of the house, but then you have the house and you got to take care of it, or dreaming of having a baby and then you have a baby and you got to take care of it, or any of the above kinds of things that people dream about, right? And then there's the reality of it, like actually being here. So it's the same, like we're moving forward, but we're like kind of on the brakes. We have a plan A, but we have a plan B, C. It's like there's a maturity or a sobriety that we can have next.
We don't normally get with Aries.
Right. We don't normally get it, but it's like it'd be very wise to have it. So we have this exuberance, we have all this possibility and potential. And at the same time, there's like the maturity of experience or the wisdom of experience going, yes, absolutely. And just know that there's things that come along with that. And there should be some contingency plans and et cetera, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, by the way, did I ever thank you for this?
Oh, you definitely thanked me for that. But you can show everybody again. It's the Aries cup with, on the other side is the mermaid. And yes, I got that for him.
And I'd show you what's on the inside, but I'm not. Oh yeah, you can see Saturn there.
Yes. And Rick, we have so many good ideas for the elephant. I think we should do it. The name for the elephant, I think we should do it towards the end. But the names just they still continue to flood in.
Yeah, Gertrude came to my mind, but
Gertrude. It's so like ironic.
Gertrude with a martini in her hand. Oh. Okay, so the full moon on April 16th. Now the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction is really, really close. In fact, it's still partile conjunct, meaning that Jupiter and Neptune are both at 24 degrees of Pisces. Jupiter is at 24.55, almost 25 degrees. Neptune is at 24.7 minutes, so just barely 24, but they're still within the same degree. That's still cooking on the full moon. The full moon is in Libra. We get the balance between self and other. Remember, Aries, I like to think of Aries as fingers and toes. You know, when a baby is born, you know, it can keep amused by its own fingers and toes for hours at a time. But it's not that it thinks it's being self-referential. It's that the true Aries energy is everything in the universe is self. And so fingers and toes can be something very, very separate and different and out there, but they're still attached to self. And yet when we get the full moon in Libra, there's this, remember I talked about the vampire, the lack of awareness? Well, when the moon is in, the full moon in Libra on April 16th, this is the maximum awareness between self, Aries, and the dance of relationship between self and others. This is that finding balance point. Here's the problem with this full moon. It's not an easy full moon. The sun and the moon are both at 26, 40, 46, 47. So it's like 26 3/4. We could say 27, just about. Pluto is at 28 degrees of Capricorn. What that means is that the full moon in Libra to the sun in Aries are both in a T-square with Pluto in Capricorn. So Pluto is square the moon on one side and square the sun on the other. And this, although it's a cardinal, meaning changeable, initiating, there's definitely more fluidity in a cardinal T-square than in a fixed T-square. But the fact of the matter is that this T-square is answering to Pluto. So Pluto is getting another, last, I'm holding on to things. And it's definitely a dynamic period of time. Meanwhile, we have Venus at 12 degrees of Pisces, which is a half square to the Aries sun and a square and a half to the Libra moon. And this is kind of like an asymmetrical T-square. In other words, now we have Venus also not thrilled with either the sun or the moon separately, but together, Venus in Pisces just wants to dream its way into everything being perfect. But we have this tug of war between inside, outside, between self and other, between good and evil, between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, between the United States and Afghanistan, between Russia and the Ukraine, between vaxxers and anti-vaxxers, between Trumpers and you pick whatever. I mean, they're all there, and that was just the tip of the iceberg. But we have a full moon that is stretching that tug of war tight with Pluto and Venus kind of at not comfortable points. However, and there is a good however here, and that is that Saturn is at 23 degrees of Aquarius, which is only 3 degrees away from being trine 23 degrees Aquarius to 26 degrees of Libra. So Saturn is trine the full moon, and Saturn is also sextile the sun at 26 Aries to 23 Aquarius. That point, whenever you have an opposition, a tug of war, if you have a planet 90 degrees to both of them, that's a T-square, and that's a really dynamic configuration. If you have a planet at one of the 4 points that are trine one side of the tug of war and sextile the other, that's called the point of Thales. Thales was a Greek philosopher, mathematician, He was the guy who came up with the theory or the notion that inside of a circle, that if you have an opposition, any point that's connected to both sides of that opposition, that point's going to make an inside 90-degree angle. In other words, it'll stay a right triangle, a 90-degree triangle. Don't want to get into the mathematics any further. The point of Thales is that point that is trine to one side of an opposition and sextile to the other side of the opposition. This is a release point. As stressful, tense, conflictual as the planet at the apex of a T-square is, the planet at the point of Thales is the place that the tension releases its energy smoothly. And what is this point? Well, it's Saturn. It actually turns out, because Mars has just moved into Pisces, that Saturn and Mars together, the midpoint is even in that mix. So the point here is that we have an incredibly potent full moon with Pluto and Venus both at very difficult points in relationship, stressful to that full moon. And yet even Saturn and Mars are relieving the tension a little bit. One other thing about this full moon, and I mentioned this at the very beginning, but not in relationship to the full moon, and that is that Mercury is coming into a conjunction with Uranus. That exact conjunction actually occurs on April 17th. The full moon occurs on April 16th, but Mercury is conjunct Uranus, which means that our minds are racing. We're pulling answers out of the air faster than we can find questions. Half of those answers are brilliant, half of them are stupid, and we can't tell the difference. Great. That's the full moon.
And do the new moon again at the end. I mean, you talked about it because that's the eclipse, right?
Yeah, and we really didn't talk again. Just a few quick words. The new moon at the end of the month, and let me also just get some. The full moon occurs on April 16th at 11:55 a.m. and that's Pacific time. Adjust your time zones accordingly. The full moon on April 30th is at 1:28 p.m. on April 30th, midday. Adjust your time zones accordingly. The thing about the eclipse full moon is that
new moon, right?
I mean new moon, right? Thank you for keeping me honest and aligned. The new moon on April 30th is at 10 degrees of Taurus. Uranus is at 14 degrees of Taurus. There's an electric energy here, even though it's in Taurus. Taurus normally is simple, straightforward, determined. Taurus likes making straight lines to where its goal is, and yet Uranus in Taurus somehow can take that straight line and rather than make it all kinds of curvy and extra wanderings and whatever, it does just the opposite. It's Captain Kirk saying, "Scotty, warp factor 7," and boom, you're there. There's that instantaneity of the lightning striking, and somehow the simplicity of Taurus becomes explosively, immediately resolved. Now, this new moon is a few degrees away from that conjunction to Taurus. The actual new moon itself will join up with Uranus within 8 hours, so it'll still be on April 30th in most places. The sun doesn't reach the conjunction to Uranus until about May 4th. Point, though, is that we can see some real radical shifting here, and we just need to keep in mind that Uranus doesn't like being in Taurus. Why? Well, what is Taurus like?
Consistency, stability.
And Uranus don't.
Right.
Uranus wants that shift, that change, that radical, whatever it is to get there. And so that's why, incidentally, while Uranus has been moving and continues to move through Taurus, that's why the changes that we're seeing are so powerful, and because because it's not giving up a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, a little bit every day, every week, every month. Instead, it's holding it, and then we get an earthquake. I mean, the Earth, like granite, doesn't adjust and move easily. You don't get earthquakes in the water. I mean, you get the results of an earthquake rippling through the water, but you don't get water quakes because you need the stress of the hot and the cold or things pulling in different ways, and water's fluid, so it just fills in. But if you have that same stress on granite, nothing moves, and then all of a sudden, kapow. And so this is why these times feel more dynamic than other times recently have. And I think that this new moon in Taurus is at the front edge of that. We also have on that same day, now we're still not far away from the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. It's still only 3.5 degrees from being exact. And we have Mars coming into the picture there. And we also have Venus exactly conjoining with Jupiter on the day of that new moon. Jupiter is conjoined, Venus is conjoined Jupiter. And in fact, the Venus-Jupiter conjunction is a half square to the eclipsed moon. And again, this is a matter of weighing how much is enough. Gee, this could be good, but if we do a lot of it, is it too much? There's that pleasure attraction of the Venus-Jupiter, and yet Taurus, even though it wants to be attracted to the pleasure, is not sure that it can let go of what it has in order to get there. It's a dynamic period of time, and the fact that it's an eclipse does seem to indicate it's a solar eclipse. So there certainly can be major shifts. In the traditional astrology, a solar eclipse often was the end of a regime. It was long live the king, death to the king. And so we'll see how this plays out, but it's a powerful one because the eclipse is so close to Jupiter. Also, Mercury has just moved into Gemini, and that Mercury, remember, we talked about this also just a couple of days prior on the 28th, Mercury was trine to Pluto, 28 degrees of Taurus to 28 degrees of Capricorn, Earth to Earth. Now that Mercury has moved into Gemini, where it eventually will go retrograde, but we're really getting to the bottom of some stuff when we see that Mercury trining Pluto end of month.
Whew. Okay. Wow. Rick, I mean, you weren't kidding. And I don't even think we really got a theme yet, but I'm going to go through a few of the highlights and then maybe we'll choose one of them for the theme. Does that sound good?
It does. I'm liking the the delayed satisfaction or the
delayed gratification. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not as flashy as some of the others, though. But
we got some flashy options too.
Go ahead. Not that you need permission from me, but the mic is yours.
I do need permission from you. Okay. Never. And actually, the names are so fun, and I can't wait to do that at the end. All right. So it's just some of the big things that came out. This whole idea of having a plan B, C, and D, not putting all of our eggs in one basket. This idea that we, like, all the planets are in one area of the sky. So we have a lot of semi-sextiles all month, which are just annoying. So that a couple things that you kept talking about is like this annoying energy, this noisy energy. It's this push-pull energy. Like, we want to go forward, but there's a lot just happening that can feel sort of irritating. Sometimes that just feels like the irritation of reality, right? Like, there's so many times I find myself going, God, why does it have to be that way? Why can't it just be this?
Exactly.
Like, why can't we all just get along? Why can't we all just love each other? It's like, oh, well, because there's all these things. So it sounds a little bit like that. We're dealing with more stuff than we want to, is what you said at one point. You also said this is an opportunity where we need to really choose to stretch our perspective. It's not going to happen naturally. We actually have to find ways to stretch our perspective, to put ourselves in other people's shoes, to really see things from a different perspective. You have this change at the end of the month. Well, one of the big things you said is that the Jupiter, Neptune, and Pisces energy is going to be with us all the way through May. right? It was like mid-May is
Yeah.
this Jupiter, Neptune, and Pisces energy, which is essentially big thinking, big like grandiose thinking, meeting our dreams and our visions, amplified in Pisces. So there's like no stopping this, except for all these irritating things that you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that kind of energy, though, is going to be with us through May. And what you said is that the Aries energy, this like Aries energy that we would think to be full on right now, isn't actually going to be happening until the end of May.
Well, it'll be happening. It won't reach its culmination, or it's like we can't take it out of the oven until it's done.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then, I mean, I had a million questions as you were talking, but we won't have time to do that.
Oh, good.
You love my questions.
I do.
It. All right. So here we go. The planets that are going to be most affected by the psychedelic elephant that we're going to name today are Pisces, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Gemini. Or anyone with planets at 23 degrees of Pisces, Virgo, Sagittarius, Gemini. Also, pretty much, you said anyone with planets at 23 degrees of anything is going to be affected by it.
Yeah, but obviously, if they're 23 degrees, of the mutables, that'll be square, conjunction, or opposed, or of the water, that'll be trines.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. And so the big, huge event of the month and arguably of the year is this Jupiter, Neptune, and Pisces event.
I would go of the month. I'm not willing to give it the year yet because, as you know, I'm still thinking that the Uranus Saturn,
I know
the Saturn Uranus square, we ain't seen the last of that yet, and so I think that holds out as the biggest event.
Would you say though that because
it's big,
it's big and it's sort of like lifetime big, right? Because we'll never have this again, and it really is this opportunity to find those dreams, those visions, and bring them into reality, but then also be mature enough to know that once they're in reality, they aren't quite as lofty as they were when they were our fantasy. Now they're real, and we actually have to like take care of them and do the 3D things, right? Okay. Did you know that we're doing a Jubilee for the Jupiter-Neptune in Pisces conjunction? It reminds me of our extravaganza name, which we'll talk about at the end a little bit too, but we're doing a premium panel event. Linda Byrd, Becca Tarnas, and Divine Harmony are going to speak about the energies on the 7th, April 7th. And then we're doing a community group experience, which just feels perfect for this psychedelic thing. Like we don't really know exactly what's going to happen at that experience, except for that we're going to be making a musical talisman that everyone's going to contribute their voice to. We're going to be making Jupiter-Neptune altars, which we're going to teach people how to do. And the whole event is a give as you wish event. So you can give as much as you want to the event. You can give nothing to the event. It's a give as you wish event, which is also the first time we've ever done anything like that. And anytime we tried to think of a price for it, it was like, I think it just needs to be whatever you want to give us. So that's happening. And you can sign up now. It's astrologyhub.com/Jubilee, astrologyhub.com/Jubilee. So that's the event for that conjunction. Okay. So everybody's affected by it. 23 degrees, especially. We have 5 planets in Pisces all the way through April 25th. And at the end of May, greatest density of Aries. And then I have in huge, large caps on my notes, name elephant. So that's the final thing we need to do.
So your Jubilee event is basically that's my birthday party.
It's your birthday party! Yay! You are so invited.
I mean, my birthday is the 6th, but I'll consider the 7th as still part.
Yes. Oh yeah, definitely. Okay. So anything, and then the eclipse at the end of the month is a big deal. You talked about it being a time of change, and change for, you said, power struggles and maybe money. Like my money, your money, power struggles, and you said it's going to have a very
my money, your money, or the World Bank money, and or cryptocurrency and or dollar, ruble. I mean, I think it's more than just the money that I or you might have in the bank.
It could be a big money change.
Yeah.
Yeah. This goes back to our plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D sort of thing that we've talked about, I think. Yeah. Okay. So some of the biggest votes, I mean, the vote that came through the most for the elephant's name is Wavy Gravy. Are you feeling it? Okay. Maybe. Okay.
Maybe.
Then we have
Wavy Gravy might be pleased.
and then we have Fantasia.
We know who. Do people know who Wavy Gravy is? That's a real person.
It's a real person, and it was said that anybody younger might not know, and I've never heard of that person, but yeah.
Wavy Gravy was the clown of the "You're on the bus, you're off the bus," the Grateful Dead, the Ken Kesey, that whole Electric Kool-Aid Acid group.
Mm-hmm.
That was Wavy Gravy.
Okay, then we have Daisy, Cosmo, Neptune, Psychedelephant, Ulturia, let's see, Psyche, Marlin, Clarissa, Horton, Seymour, Fantasia.
We had Fantasia, Daisy.
I
like Gertie also for Goethe, for the
Gertie.
German
poet. That is cute. I think we might have to go with that because that's what you were feeling. There's a Timothy. It's just cute. Horton. Lots of votes for Horton. Dreamwaves, Rainbow.
And we know Horton is the Dr. Seuss elephant. The I said what I meant what I said, and I said what I meant. An elephant's word, something is 100%. Horton hatches the Who. Yeah.
All right, Rick, what's your vote? Fred. We have a Fred. Do you have a vote?
I kind of like Fred, but I don't. I like the Gertie. I like the Daisy. And there was another one. I like Gertie.
All right, let's go Gertie. That's what you were getting Gertrude, and you were gonna say Gertie for short already, right?
Yeah.
All right, Gertie the psychedelic elephant. That's the Jupiter-Neptune and Pisces conjunction.
I got it.
I love it. Okay, and one more announcement for all of you: the wait list for the Chart Reading Extravaganza Part 2.
Hey, that's me.
That's you. Yes, this is going to be all focused on timing. So transits, solar arcs, progressions. So Rick's going to be looking at people's charts and seeing how the chart unfolds through time.
Right. For those people who took the first chart reading extravaganza, we did 2 charts per session for 4 weeks. The people whose charts were being done are in the group. If you register and you want your chart considered, there'll be a way in which you can submit your birth data. But the thing is that rather than spending an hour digging into the mechanics of the chart and doing a chart reading based upon that person, we'll do about 10 or 15 minutes of that just so we know who we're talking to. But the focus is going to be, how do we unfold that chart in time? And as an astrologer, how do we figure out what's important? How do we frame it? How do we talk about the future? What's the relationship between forecasting and prediction and guiding, life coaching? These are all things that'll come up. And I'm very excited about it because in my work, this is what I feel like I excel at. This is what I love to do. And so, so Chart Reading Extravaganza Part 2, Transits and Timing.
Yes. And so if you want to get on the wait list, registration isn't open yet. You can go to astrologyhub.com/timing. We are going to open up registration mid-April, and the actual event is happening every Thursday in May.
Correct.
Yes. So we'd love to have you all there. Also, Rick, it has prepared a teaching that goes along with this timing extravaganza.
Right. And that is a 1-hour pre-recorded lesson that you can listen to at your leisure, hopefully before the first actual class. So you have some background, and there'll be handouts with that so that you'll actually have, it won't necessarily quite like be a study guide session by session, but it will in fact be kind of material that you can use for replaying what it is that I'll be doing live.
Yes. Yes. And you'll get access to that when you register. So you'll have the time
Exactly.
to do it. Yes. All right. We'd love for all of you to attend that event. The Jubilee is happening next week. If you want to do that and give as you wish and be a part of this trippy group experience that we're going to be doing, even the planning of the event has felt trippy. Like it hasn't been logical and
Is
linear.
Becca
Like
bringing her harp?
she better. Great idea.
Maybe I
Yes.
should show up and bring my flute.
Oh my God. Yes. You are invited to play the flute. Becca will do the harp. That's so great. Can you do it? Can you be a part of that on one of those? Anyways, we'll talk about this.
We'll talk about
it. All right. Thanks everybody so much for being here. It's been amazing to spend this time with you. Thank you so much for being a part of our community. Thank you as always for making astrology a part of your life. We'll catch you Cosmic Connection, same time, same place next week. And we'll see you on all the episodes that happen in between now and then. Take care, everybody.